And they have polling that shows most Americans support what President Trump is doing, which is to prevent Iran from getting a nuke. Whether that means regime change is a whole different issue. But the goal is to make sure Iran doesn't get a nuke. This is CNN's pollster Harry Enton, number 19.
You've looked at all the numbers. Trump has said that Iran cannot possibly get a nuclear weapon, and that is what this is all about. How do Americans feel about that particular thing?
Yeah, look, I think it's a complicated picture overall, but on this particular question, and overall, I feel like there's more support for Donald Trump's positions than is comically acknowledged. Oppose Iran getting a nuclear weapon. I mean, look at this. 79% of adults agree on that. They agree with Donald Trump. Iran cannot get a nuclear weapon. 83% of Republicans, 79% of independents, 79% of Democrats. When you get 79% of Democrats and 83% of Republicans agreeing on anything, you know that that position is the very clear majority in this country. And so the American public is with Donald Trump. They definitely oppose Iran getting nuclear weapons.
So this is a nuance here, but, Trump and Netanyahu both arguing that Iran is close to being capable of making a nuclear weapon. If that is the case, what is the feeling of Americans as to whether the United States should get involved in this conflict?
Right. If you buy Donald Trump's theory of the case, and I think that's important to note, this is polling from April. If Iran's trying to make a nuclear weapon, look at this. Overall, you get the slight plurality. I mean, it's within the margin of error, but the slight plurality of Americans actually favor U.S. airstrikes compared to 47% opposing it. Now, here's the other nugget I'll note, right? There's been a lot of talk online and on social media and in podcasts of a divide within the Republican ranks. But here, on this question, if Iran's trying to make a nuclear weapon, look at that. 69% of Republicans, the clear vast majority of Republicans, favor U.S. airstrikes on Iran, on their nuclear facilities. But there is this substantial minority, 27%, who oppose such an idea. So it's not surprising you're hearing those other voices besides Donald Trump out there. There are plenty of them in the Republican ranks who oppose the U.S. striking Iran if they're trying to make a nuclear weapon. But the clear majority of Republicans are with Donald Trump if, in fact, Iran is trying to make nuclear weapons. They do, in fact, potentially favor U.S. airstrikes.
Do Americans prefer a sort of military action here or a diplomatic solution when it comes to Iran?
Right. So, we're talking about you can favor one thing, but you could also favor another thing more. So, yes, the U.S. public plurality and the vast majority of Republicans would favor U.S. airstrikes if Iran's trying to make a nuclear weapon. But what do they prefer? To limit the risk of Iran making nuclear weapons, the American public prefers what? They prefer a negotiated agreement. 69% of the American public prefer a negotiated agreement as compared to 14% who prefer taking military action. I will note, Sarah Seidner, that this 69% includes 64% of Republicans. So even if Republicans, the clear majority, would in fact support airstrikes on Iran, U.S. airstrikes on Iran, they prefer a negotiated agreement.
And you've looked across the board, but we do need to mention that this was in May of 2025 that this polling was taken. We are now well into June, and these strikes are happening, and the United States is being sort of asked to come into the war by Israel.
We have polling now. We'll see where this polling takes as the political sides make their argument.
As to what he intends to do, here's what President Trump told CNN, number 29.
I have ideas as to what to do, but I haven't made a final. I like to make the final decision 1 second before it's due, because things change. I mean, especially with war. Things change with war. It can go from one extreme to the other. War is very bad. We'll see what happens. I've been asked about it by everybody, but I haven't made a decision.
Fred is in Vancouver, Washington. Fred, you're on the Larry Elder Show. Thank you so much for calling. I appreciate it.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
I can.
I think I used to work on drilling rigs in Wyoming, and I think a money-saving way to do this, once we go ahead as far as letting inspectors go down and check that silo out, which, if we get that far, all they got to do is go down there, open every door, every hatch, put a wired camera, because I don't think Simply Safe would work. It needs the outside air for the internet connection. Put a wired camera on every door, every hatch, all the way up to the top. Get a simple oil drilling rig on the very top of it, and just proceed to drill a hole to the bottom and fill the whole thing with cement. which will have to be done anyway if we waste all our money on that bunker buster MOP, M-O-P, because once that thing does its job, there's going to be a big hole in the ground. That hole has to be covered or filled in, preferably with concrete, which you would do with any nuclear burial, any nuclear ordnance. You'd bury it the same way.
Well, Fred, all I have to say is my suspicion is virtually every contingency has been explored, including that one.
For full shows, live and on demand, it's Salem News Channel.